scholars, Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Welcome in the session. As you know, today we will discuss Immanuel Kant's thesis of perpetual peace. In this part of his thesis, to perpetual peace, second section, he discusses this section contains the definitive articles of perpetual peace among states. So, Immanuel Kant starts with saying that the state of nature is not a state of peace. State of nature, you must have studied state of nature. It simply means if there is no government, if there is no law, there is no authority, if there is no state, it is state of nature. In the state of nature, people live on their own. Uh, everyone rules himself or herself. Because there is no law, so it is a state of war. The state of nature is because everyone has to ensure their security, then they are in a state of war with against one another. People living near each other are not always fighting, but the danger of fighting is always there. So in the state of nature, when there is no government, no authority, no law, no court, no police, no army, so although they are not always fighting, but the danger of fighting is always there. So a state of peace must be created. So people are not happy with the state of war in the state of nature. So they want to have a state of peace. Just avoiding war is not enough. If one person does not promise peace to the other, there is no real peace. So, to have peace, people have to promise to one another that they will live in peace. Only a legal system can make this promise sure. Okay, now if people make promise that they will not harm one another, they will not attack one another. But what if some of the people do not keep their promise? If they violate their promise, then so it means there has to be some implementing authority, some authority which implements that promise, that rule which the people have made. So to implement that rule, that promise, there has to be a legal system. If we want to have an implementation authority, then we need some rules, some laws, some legal system. Only a legal system can make this promise sure. If one person asks for peace and the other does not agree, the first person may treat him as an enemy. If one person asks for peace and the other does not agree, the first person may treat him as an enemy. First definitive article of perpetual peace. The civil constitution of every state shall be republican. Now, here republican is important. The civil constitution of every state shall be republican. A republican constitution is based on three main ideas. According to Immanuel Kant, a republican constitution is based on three main ideas. The first idea is all people in society are free as human beings. The second idea is everyone is under the same law as subjects. So it means there is political equality because there is the same law for all subjects. The third rule is all are equal as citizens of the state. So there is a legal equality, there is political equality. So this is called republicanism, according to Immanuel Kant. This is the only type of constitution that comes from the idea of an original contract. So people who come to want to come out of the state of nature, they want to have a state of peace. They form a contract with each other. They make promises to one another, which is called a contract. So it is a sort of agreement. All laws made by the people must be based on this contract. So no law should violate this promise. No law should violate this contract. So this constitution is the base of all civil constitutions in terms of law. This constitution is the base of all civil constitutions in terms of law. Now, the question is the Republican Constitution the only one that can bring lasting peace? Is the Republican Constitution the only one that can bring lasting peace? Immanuel Kant asks. The Republican Constitution has a pure origin. Kant believes that the Republican Constitution has a pure origin. It comes from the clear idea of what is right. It also gives hope for a good result, lasting peace. Here is why. In a republic, the people must agree before going to war. This means they will think very carefully. In a republic, people must agree because in a republic, people rule. So they make decisions. So they have to agree before starting a war. This means they will think very carefully. They will ask if it is worth it. They will ask if the war is worth it. War brings great pain. They will have to fight. They will pay for war with their own money. They will suffer the damage war leaves behind. They will also face heavy debts that will spoil the peace and may never be paid off. But in a state that is not a republic, things are different. The people are not true citizens. The ruler is not one of them. In a state, any state which is not a republic, where people do not rule, things are different. In a state which is not a republic, the people are not true citizens, the ruler is not one of them. He owns the state. War does not cost him much. Like, dictators, kings, monarchs, they own the state, they are the owners. He does not lose his comforts. For example, a king, he does not lose his parties, his hunting, his rich homes, and so on. Such a ruler can start war for small reasons, for petty issues. He may do it for fun. Sometimes the monarchs, the kings, the dictators start war for fun. They don't care that people will suffer, that people will die. He may leave it to his diplomats to make the war sound fair without caring if it truly is. Now, the diplomats, they carry the task that they will justify the wars in view of the people, in the eyes of the people. So the kings don't care whether the war is just, whether the war is required or not. They start a war whenever they like. The following points must be made clear so people do not confuse a Republican constitution with a democratic one. Now, here is the problem. Immanuel Kant is a great philosopher. His ideas are great, but here he has confused republicanism with democracy. In fact, in the literature, republicanism is similar to democracy. You know, in the United States, there are two parties: Republican Party and Democratic Party. So both are democratic. In fact, historically, in republics, people had right to take part in politics, but not all people. It was one of the differences between republicanism and democracy that in republics, only the landed aristocracy, the landed people, the landowners who had landed property, they had the right to take part in politics. So these countries, these states were called republics. In democracy, all the people, whether they had property or not, they had the right to take part in politics. So it is the main difference between republicanism and democracy, which we frequently find in various books on politics, political science. But here Immanuel Kant has confused it. Actually, Immanuel Kant lived centuries ago. At that time, democracy had not flourished as such. Democracy had not developed as such. At that time, democracy had a different form. So he criticizes democracy that he found in his own time. So let us be clear on this. So Kant says the following points must be made clear so people do not confuse a republican constitution with a democratic one. There are two ways to describe the form of a state. One way to describe the form of a state is by looking at who holds the highest power. This is called the form of sovereignty. Who is the sovereign? There are only three types of the states. When one person rules, it is autocracy. When a group rules a state, it is aristocracy. Or when all the people rule, it is democracy. The second way is by looking at how the ruler governs the people. The first way to classify the states is looking at who is the sovereign. The second way to classify the states is by looking at how the ruler governs the people, how the government governs. This is called the form of government. It is based on the constitution, which turns a crowd into a people. There are two forms of government: republican government and despotic government. In a republic, the power to make laws and the power to carry them out are kept separate. Separation of powers, legislature is separate and the executive is separate. The legislature makes the laws and the executive implements the laws made by the legislature. So, according to Immanuel Kant, if these two powers are separate, the power to make laws and the power to implement the laws, then it is a republic. In despotism, the same ruler makes the laws and enforces them. So, if there is no separation of powers, like in kingdoms, in monarchies, the kings and the monarchs, they make the laws and they implement the laws themselves. So, Immanuel Kant says it is despotism. In this system, the ruler treats the public will as his own will. So, in despotism, the ruler, the king, the monarch, the dictator, they find their own will is the public will. Of the three types of state, democracy is, in the proper sense, a kind of despotism. So here you see Immanuel Kant does not like the democracy he found in his time. In his view, the democracy at that time was a kind of despotism. This is because in democracy, everyone rules even over those who do not agree. So everyone rules even over those who do not agree. So decisions are made by all that are not really all. Decisions are made by all that are not really all. This makes the general will go against itself and against the freedom. Any government that is not representative has no real form. Any government that is not representative has no real form. This is because one person cannot make laws and carry them out at the same time. It is like in logic. The general rule cannot also be the case used to prove it. If we want to prove a rule, we cannot use the same rule to prove it. It is logic. Autocracy and aristocracy are never perfect. They often lead to despotism. Now, you see, uh, Immanuel Kant has made three types of states by looking at who holds the sovereignty. And he is criticizing all three forms: democracy, autocracy, aristocracy. He said he is criticizing all three. He has just now criticized democracy, and here he is saying autocracy and aristocracy are never perfect. They often lead to despotism, but they can still be shaped to work like a representative system. For example, Frederick II said he was only the highest servant of the state. Democracy cannot do this. In democracy, everyone wants to rule, so it cannot have a true representative system. So I think representative democracy had not developed as yet in Immanuel Kant's time. Now, in this, it has mainly developed in the 20th century, and representative democracy and representation has gone a long way in dozens and twenties of countries. And I think if Immanuel Kant becomes alive, he gets back to this world, he would prefer this representative democracy over other forms of government. The fewer people who hold power and the more they truly represent others, the more the state moves toward a republican constitution. It is easier to reach this in a monarchy than in an aristocracy. So, in fact, he is preferring monarchy over aristocracy. In a democracy, it is almost impossible without a violent revolution. So, Immanuel Kant is arguing that a monarch can be a representative. A monarch can be a better representative of the people. But at the same time, he is criticizing that they are usually despotic. They can never be perfect. The form of government is more important to the people than the form of the state. Still, the form of the state matters if it helps build a just constitution. A just government must be based on representation. Now, look here. He is also emphasizing representation. And representation is possible only in democracy, representative democracy. So Kant says a just government may be based on representation, only then can it be republican. My comment: Kant is not against democracy. He likes all democratic values. For example, he likes constitutionalism, he likes separation of legislative and executive authority, he likes representation, he likes political equality, he likes legal equality, so he likes good relations among citizens. So these are all democratic characteristics of democratic form of government. So it simply means he is not anti-democracy. Without this, the government becomes harsh and unjust, no matter what the constitution says. Old republics did not know this system. That is why they all became despotic. And even then, rule by one person was still the least harmful. Rule by one person, it is kingdom, kingship. Second definitive article of Perpetual Peace. International rights shall be based on the federalism of free states. International rights shall be based on the federalism of free states. Nations, like people, can be judged in the same way. When they live without any shared laws, they are in a state of nature. In this state, they can harm one another just by being close. Because there are no shared laws, they live without any shared laws in the state of nature. Each nation, to stay safe, can and should ask others to join in an agreement. This agreement should be like a civil constitution. It should protect the rights of each nation. This kind of agreement would be a federation of nations, but it would not be one single step. In fact, the Charter of the League of Nations and the Charter of the United Nations, they are one step towards this goal of international peace, which Immanuel Kant is discussing here. That would be a contradiction. A state always has a ruler and people who obey. If many nations became one state, they would become one people. But this goes against the idea that we are talking about many different nations. They should stay separate but agree to follow shared rules. So states should stay separate. The countries should stay separate. They do not need to form one state or one country, but they should stay separate but agree to follow shared rules. So they should have an international law, a strong international law. We look down on how savages hold on to their wild freedom. We look down. We do not like how savages hold on to their wild freedom. Savages enjoy a lot of freedom, complete freedom, but their freedom is wild. It is not logical. It is not desirable. The savages choose to keep fighting each other rather than accept fair rules they make for themselves. Because the savages, they do not have any rules, they do not have any laws, so they keep fighting one another. So although they are free, they are completely free, but they do not have good life. They do not have safety and security. So they choose to keep fighting each other rather than accept fair rules they make for themselves. So they do not accept any rules. They choose crazy freedom instead of smart freedom. So if people make laws and they do not attack each other, they live in peace and security. It is smart freedom. We call this, they choose crazy freedom. We call this rude, cruel, and a shame to humanity. If people do not make laws, they do not make contract and agreement and promises with each other not to harm one another. So it is rude, it is cruel, it is shame on them. One might think that civilized nations already joined as states would want to leave such a bad condition quickly. But instead, each state is proud that no outside law can control it. Each state is proud that no outside law can control it. Because at the time of at the Immanuel Kant's time, international law had not developed as yet. In the books, the things were had been written. Vattel's book was very good. The Law of the Nations. Hugo Grotius had written on the law of international law. The books were there, the ideas were there, but the states did not had much appetite to act upon the international law. So Immanuel Kant says, instead, each state is proud that no outside law can control it. It sees its glory in this. So states want to be absolutely sovereign. They do not want to compromise their sovereignty. The ruler of a state feels powerful because he can order thousands to die for a cause that does not affect them. You know, the sovereign kings, the sovereign monarchs, the sovereign rulers who single handedly enjoy sovereignty. They can ask many people to die for them without any just reason. He does not have to risk anything himself. The sovereign doesn't have to risk his or her own life. The real difference between European and American savages is this: many American tribes were eaten by their enemies. So, America, it was a culture. They would attack each other, they would capture the members of their enemy tribes, and they would eat them as food. So, it was very cruel. But Europeans used their enemies to grow stronger. They turned the defeated into subjects. They do not eat them. Europeans do not eat the conquered people. This gives them more people to use in even bigger wars. So they colonize the people in other regions, in other parts of the world, and they train them as soldiers. This gives them more people to use in even bigger wars. The evil side of human nature is often hidden by government laws. So when there are governments, when there are laws, so they bring some order to human nature. So the evil side of human nature is often hidden by government laws, but it can be clearly seen in how states treat each other freely. It can be clearly seen in how states treat each other freely. It is surprising that the word right has not been completely removed. It is surprising that the word right has not been completely removed from war politics as something silly. No state has dared to reject it openly. Writers like Hugo Grotius, Pufendorf, and Vattel are still quoted to justify wars. But their writings, whether based on philosophy or diplomacy, have no legal power. They cannot have such power because no common law controls all states. No state has ever given up war plans because of these authors. Still, every state shows some respect for the idea of right, at least in words. This shows there is a deeper moral side in humans. It is hidden now, but it may help people fight the evil inside them. They may even hope others will do the same. Otherwise, states at war would never use the word right except to mock it. Like one French prince once said, the strong have the right by nature, and the weak must obey. States can try to protect their rights only through war. They cannot take their disputes to an outside court. But war, even if it ends in victory, never decides what is right. War never decides what is right. It only decides in the favor of the powerful. A peace treaty may stop the current war, but it does not end the condition of war. A peace treaty does not end the condition of war. Condition of war remains there even after the peace treaty. A new reason for war can always be found. This state of war is not fully unjust because each state judges its own actions. For individuals living without law, natural law says they must leave that lawless state. For individuals living without law, natural law says they must leave that lawless state, they must leave the state of nature. But this does not apply to states because they already have their own legal systems. They cannot be forced by others to accept a wider legal system. States cannot be forced by others to accept a wider legal system. So, the international law, because states are sovereign, it is their own choice whether they want to act upon the international law or not. Other states cannot force them to abide by the international law. Speaking from a moral point of view, reason still condemns war. Human reason condemns war. It says peace is an immediate duty. Human reason says peace is an immediate duty, but peace needs more than just a peace treaty. Peace needs a special kind of agreement between nations. This is called a peace federation. Such a federation is not like a normal treaty, which only ends one war. So it is a special type of treaty in Kant's view. When passed, all states they form a federation and they promise each other not to attack one another. Instead, it tries to end all wars forever. A treaty for federation tries to end all wars forever. It does not try to increase the power of states. It only tries to protect the freedom of each state and the freedom of all others in the group. So, this is how you see Immanuel Kant believed that perpetual peace is possible. Perpetual peace can be attained if all the states make efforts in this direction. These states do not have to obey a shared legal system with force. It is possible to make this idea real. If a strong and wise people become a republic, they will naturally work for lasting peace. This republic can guide other states to join the Peace Federation. Slowly, more and more states can be added. In this way, the world can move toward lasting peace based on international law. It makes sense when a group of people says, "There shall be no war among us. We want a form. We want to form a state. We will set up a highest authority to make laws, to enforce them, and to judge disputes." So these are the highest authorities. This will help us solve problems peacefully. But when a state says there shall be no war between me and other states, even though I do not accept any higher authority to protect my rights or their rights, then it is not clear what this trust is based on. So it has, in fact, no real power, this kind of promise. This trust must come from something like the agreement people make in civil society. So when people make an agreement in civil society, they create some implementation authority, the authority to implement the rules and laws. That agreement at the level of states is free federalism. Free federalism. The reason demands this idea be joined with international law. Without this, international law would mean nothing. So there has to be free federalism and there has to be international law. Then such kind of promises make sense. One cannot think of international law as a right to make war. That would mean a supposed right to decide what is right by force, not by fair and equal laws that limit everyone's freedom. That would mean a supposed right to decide what is right by force, not by fair and equal laws that limit everyone's freedom. It would follow only selfish rules. If that were true, then it would mean it is just for violent people to destroy each other and find peace only in a common grave that hides all the horrors of war along with those who caused them. So, if this kind of peace is tried to achieve, then all the humanity will be at the risk of being murdered, being killed. In the case of states, reason says there is only one way to escape the lawless state of war. They must give up their wild freedom, like individuals do, and accept public laws. In this way, they can form a lawless union of states, lawful union. In this way, the states can form a lawful union of states or a state of peoples, which could grow and include all the peoples of the world. So, Immanuel Kant is saying that all states they form a federation. But since most states do not want a world republic based on international law, they reject in practice what is right in theory. The only possible answer is a lasting and growing federation. So, a global federation is the solution in Immanuel Kant's view. This federation should aim to stop war and reduce the drive toward violence and rejection of law. I think the idea of collective security also is linked to this. Although I think the idea of collective security it emerged later. It was not existent. It did not exist in Immanuel Kant's time. But I think the the thesis of perpetual peace, as expounded by Immanuel Kant, it provides some foundation for the idea of collective security. Yet there will always be the danger that this fury might break out again. And let me also mention here that the League of Nations and the United Nations actually they were established to provide collective security. And their founders wanted to bind the states that they agree on the idea of collective security. This idea means if one state is invaded, if there is an aggression against one state, all other members of the League of Nations or United Nations would come to its help, would join the war against the aggressor. But the problem was that these states they did not want to commit themselves to such a great promise. So they could not agree while they were establishing the United Nations and as well as the League of Nations. The states did not agree on the idea of collective security because it is such a huge commitment, huge promise. But Immanuel Kant's ideas, in fact, I think, provide some foundation for the idea of collective security. Yet there will always be the danger that this fury might break out again. Third definitive article of Perpetual Peace. There are three definitive articles. The first two we have discussed, the last and third one is here. Cosmopolitan right shall be limited to the conditions of universal hospitality. Very important. Cosmopolitan right shall be limited to the conditions of universal hospitality. So here Immanuel Kant discusses the idea of cosmopolitanism. Cosmopolitanism. As in the earlier points, we are talking here about right, not about kindness. In this case, hospitality means the right of a stranger not to be treated as an enemy when he arrives in another land. Hospitality means the right of a stranger not to be treated as an enemy when he arrives in another land. So, if a foreigner comes to our country, uh, the, they should not be treated as enemies. If he can be sent away without being harmed, he may be turned back. So rather than harming the foreigner, he should be turned back. But if the stranger behaves peacefully, the host must not treat him with hostility. The stranger does not have the right to be treated as a guest. The foreigner does not have the right to be treated as a guest. That would need a special agreement based on kindness, where he is allowed to stay for a certain time. So, if the foreigner, the stranger, wants to stay in another country for a time of a period of time, then the governments of both of the countries need to have a special agreement. If there is no such agreement, then the foreigner does not have the right to stay. Instead, he has the right to visit. All humans have this right. It comes from the idea that the surface of the earth belongs to everyone in common. Since the earth is round, people cannot spread out without limits. They must finally live near each other and tolerate one another. In the beginning, no one had more right to any land than anyone else. In the beginning, no one had more right to any land than anyone else. Some parts of the world, like seas and deserts, are empty and separate people. These deserts and seas, they separate people, but they also allow contact. Ships can cross the sea, camels can cross deserts. In this way, people can meet and trade with each other. This uses the shared right of humans to the earth's surface. When coastlines like the Barbary Coast attack ships or enslave sailors, it is wrong. When desert tribes rob travelers, it also goes against natural right. The right of hospitality means only the right to try peaceful contact with locals. I think Vettel or some other philosopher has defined the law of nature this way. Don't do to others what you don't want to be done to yourself. I read it in a book. I don't sure. I'm not sure in which book I read it. A book on political philosophy has mentioned this. Don't do to others what you don't want to be done to yourself. It is the law of nature. So Immanuel Kant is saying here, if the people in desert they rob the travelers, it is against the law of nature. The right of hospitality means only the right to try peaceful contact with locals. This makes it possible for distant parts of the world to meet peacefully. Over time, these contacts can be guided by public laws. In this way, humans can slowly move toward a world community. If we compare this with the unfriendly behavior of the civilized states in our part of the world, especially the training ones, we see great injustice. Immanuel Kant was a German philosopher, he was a European, and he is talking about the Europeans and he is criticizing their policies. He says if we compare this with the unfriendly behavior of the civilized states in our part of the world, in Europe, especially the trading states, we see great injustice. So he is criticizing the European powers that they are unjust. When these states visited foreign lands and peoples, they treated it the same as conquering them. Places like America, like African lands, the Spice Islands, and the Cape were seen as empty lands when discovered. The native people were treated as if they did not matter. In East India, Hindustan, they sent foreign soldiers. They said it was only to set up trading posts. The Europeans, when arrived in Hindustan, they said it was only to set up trading posts. But these soldiers brought suffering. They oppressed the local people. They caused wars between states. They brought hunger, unrest, lies, and many other troubles for mankind. Now, you see here, Immanuel Kant, as a European, is criticizing the European powers. It is the academic honesty, it is the intellectual honesty to speak the truth, to, to, to call a spade a spade. China and Japan have tried to deal with such visitors. I think Immanuel Kant has used the word Nippon. Nippon, noun transliteration of a Japanese name for Japan. So in Japanese, the Japan is called Nippon. So Immanuel Kant has used this word Nippon. China and Japan have tried to deal with such visitors. They have wisely chosen to limit contact. China has allowed contact but not allowed entry into its land. China did not, at that time, China did not allow foreigners to enter into mainland China. Japan has allowed contact with only one European country, the Dutch. But even then, it keeps them apart from the native people like prisoners. The worst part of this is that the use of force brings no real gain, or the best part from a moral view. The use of force brings no real gain. The trading companies are almost falling apart. Here, Immanuel Kant is talking about the European trading companies which used force against foreigners and harmed them. Immanuel Kant says these trading companies are falling apart. They are not bringing much advantage or profits. They are going through, they are suffering from losses. The sugar islands, where the cruelest kind of slavery happens, bring little true profit. They are mainly used to train sailors for war. Foreign people living in those islands, Europeans mainly use them to train sailors for war. This helps the European powers fight because Europeans had colonized other nations, and from other nations they trained more and more sailors and soldiers, and it led to more and more wars among European powers. So the Kant is saying this unjust behavior of European powers has not brought much advantage. It has only increased battles and wars among European powers. These powers speak a lot about their religion, but while they talk of being holy, they drink injustice like water. Look at the words. Look at the words. What is Immanuel Kant saying? The European powers speak a lot about their religion, but while the European powers talk of being holy, they drink injustice like water. They are, every moment they do injustice to other people. They believe they are the chosen people just because of their faith. The people of the earth are becoming more and more connected. Now, when rights are violated in one place, people feel it everywhere. When rights are violated in one place, people feel it everywhere. Because of this, the idea of cosmopolitan right is not a dream or an exaggeration. Cosmopolitan right means when people from one country visit other countries, other parts of the world, they are not treated as enemies. It is a necessary addition to the unwritten rules of national and international law. It is important for human rights in general and for lasting peace. Only with this can we hope to move forward toward peace that never ends. Only with this can we hope to move forward toward peace that never ends, and that is perpetual peace. So I'm closing the YouTube and I join you back on the Google Meet.